My man, John, good to have you back. John, how are you?
Jim, I'm outstanding, my friend. Happy opening week. Always love listening to your show, watching your show. Love the interview with Greg Berhalter as well. Great to have the U.S. national team back in the World Cup.
Right, and I appreciate you saying that. And don't you forget about the Frozen Four. I know you're all about that life, too.
I am. Denver, all the credit to Denver. Young head coach David Carl, what an outstanding program they have. A lot of youth there. I thought Carter Mazer was very good for them. Bobby Brink as well, deserving champions, the pioneers of Denver.
Jon bleeping Morosi joining us. All right, John, you were at Yankee Stadium for Yankees Red Sox, and Josh Donaldson opening the season with a walk-off single in the 11th. What was that moment like in the stadium?
Loved it, Jim. It was electrifying. And for me, I think it's important to have those moments of gratitude and appreciation of where we're at. Certainly, it was a difficult winter for MLB with the work stoppage, and really, that was the first time Yankee Stadium had a full house on opening day since 2019. And so when you think about what that means and just the ability to be together again all in one place, it's pretty extraordinary. And just to have that beautiful weather, honored to be on the call with Bob Costas and Tom Verducci, Jim, it was quite an extraordinary day to be a part of.
By the way, it does not get any better than those two. Costas and Verducci. We're joined by Jon Morosi. John, so you're going to see the Yankees again this week, as I mentioned, as part of that showcase game against Toronto. How do you like the way Donaldson fits into the lineup, and what do you make of this Yankees lineup overall?
Jim, I think that this lineup for the Yankees right now has a lot of potential. And certainly Aaron Judge, much made of the fact no extension for him, so certainly a lot of conversation about where this is all going, where his eventual price point may be. But to me, the New York Yankees, when you consider the maybe the one issue is a lack of left-handed balance. That's why Anthony Rizzo's fast start is so important. You think about the heritage of this organization, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Reggie Jackson, all these left-handed sluggers. Well, each of the last 2 years, Jim, the Yankees finished among the 5 worst teams in baseball in terms of total numbers of home runs by left-handed batters. It's astonishing when you consider the ballpark and the way they've been built around power for so long. So I think to have Rizzo starting fast, crucial. Of course, they're able to win that weekend series against the Red Sox. And Donaldson, for me, it was funny, Jim. We were talking actually with Aaron Boone about this. The last player who joined the Yankees and had that played with that edge, to borrow the hockey term, that sandpaper. I think you have to go back to Gary Sheffield for that player that brings that edge and attitude, and I love what Donaldson does for that team, certainly in a very competitive division. He knows that division well. He won an MVP award in that division, Jim, so I think for Josh Donaldson, a great fit in many ways for the New York Yankees.
I love that you referenced Chef. I love Gary Sheffield. Jon Morosi is joining us. John, you mentioned Aaron Judge's contractual situation. He's not the only one, right? Xander Bogaerts, Rafael Devers with the Red Sox. Like, in your experience, how big of a distraction is it? Is that nothing, or is that something that can negatively impact a player or an entire team?
You know, it's a great question, Jim. I think with Judge, there's a lot going on there, certainly, and the Yankees made him a strong offer. I would say this, too. One of the more surreal moments I've seen in terms of covering press conferences and GMs, Brian Cashman saying, Jim, to all of us exactly what the offer was that was rejected. I can't recall that ever happening in my career, being there, especially on opening day, Yankee Stadium, and the GM of the Yankees saying, here's exactly what we offered our best homegrown player since Derek Jeter, and he said no. It was a pretty remarkable set of circumstances, to say the very least. I understand why the Yankees made that offer. I understand why they made it public, just to be transparent and to really show their fans how serious they are about winning. I also understand from Aaron's perspective why he believes that he deserves to be paid among the top echelon of players in MLB. And now the unique part is the better Judge plays, yes, the better the Yankees are going to play, but also the higher probability that he's going to get priced out of the market. I think Aaron Judge is someone who is so focused, Jim, that the possible distraction of a contract is not going to have that much of a negative impact, if any, on his numbers. And certainly we do see some players who really lock it in with laser focus in their contract year. I think Aaron Judge has that kind of personality.
Yeah, John, it's so interesting, right? It's like there are guys that do lock in and have that laser focus, and and then it takes another breed altogether to lock in, have that laser focus with the pressure of being in that town with that uniform on. And I agree with you. I think that he is built for that and wired for it. What about Shohei Ohtani? He was nasty on the mound, John, in the season opener against Houston. He's been off to a slightly slow start at the plate. What kind of a season are you expecting from him this year?
Jim, it's an excellent question because Ohtani is someone that it's not precedented, obviously, what he did last year in any possible way. Like, no one did it, not even Babe Ruth. And so now you have to calibrate and say, okay, well, what is reasonable to expect him to do every single year? And certainly he did have, I think it was, 119 miles an hour of an exit velocity for a hit. So clearly, on some level, the bat is still working. But I also think that there's that issue of how exactly he gets into a rhythm. And I really think, Jim, for him, because of the uniqueness of what he does, that maybe the shortened spring training impacts him more than it does a lot of other players. There has to be, and I'll use this word, such harmony within your body to be able to pitch and hit at this level so consistently that I have to imagine for him that the lack of bulk of workload for him in spring training might have more of an impact on Shohei than basically almost any other player in the game just because of how much he has to keep lined up. So I think the one thing for the Angels, they have a better team this year than they did last year, probably the best team they've ever had since Ohtani has joined. So that's a positive where maybe he can lessen his burden a little bit in terms of what the expectations are, but certainly when you set the bar as high as he did last year, Jim, doing things that no one has ever done, not even Babe Ruth, in the history of the game, very difficult, I think, to have an encore.
I think that's an awesome description, harmony, that he needs that. And John, not that this is an original thought, but I'm playing off the point that you just made, that they look like they're a better team. It's a long, long year. They're off to a 1-3 start, but the very, very obvious reset here, there's no doubt that he is a superstar, but how important is it finally, that the Angels make the postseason this year so the entire country can see Ohtani and Mike Trout in meaningful games in October?
Well, you're right on, Jim, and that I think is where, when we talk about this game and the sport where we're at, we need those moments where, for a player to become truly part of the American sports firmament, if you will, and be a baseball player, they have to be there every year for you, or at least often enough in October. That was part of the grandeur of Derek Jeter. He was there from the time he was 20, 21, and he never left our TV screens until he retired. He was there every single year. And so certainly the Yankees have their own platform that's unique to them, but other players on other teams can become that popular if they win enough. And that simply has not happened with Mike Trout and Ohtani to this point. It's a very competitive division. I'm a believer that Seattle has become significantly more competitive. And I think they're a fun story, too. Certainly Seattle, longest playoff drought in North American pro sports currently. And so there's a lot of longing there. The fans there have been so patient. They've gotten so close. So Seattle has its own drought to handle. Of course, the Angels, they've only made the playoffs once in Trout's career back in 2014, and they were swept by the Kansas City Royals. So it's a really unique time, and I think for the sport to achieve the heights that we wanted to achieve, Jim, the Angels do have to become a relevant team where fans would have a real passionate debate about how Trout compares to the all-time greats in his position, because you compare Trout's career to Mickey Mantle, and they're darn similar, but we all know that Mickey Mantle is an American sports icon on a level that Mike Trout simply is not. And I think that's going to be the quest for baseball. How do you bring Trout closer into a comparison of the likes of a Tom Brady or an Aaron Rodgers in current times in sports in our country, where a baseball player can become that relevant? He has to be on great teams, Jim, for that to happen.
Such a good point. Jon Morosi joining me for another moment or so. John, I've got to get your thoughts on this. What do you make of the reaction from Ronald Acuna Jr. to the departure of Freddie Freeman, and then Freeman's reaction to that?
Yeah, it was quite a back and forth, Jim, on opening day, really surreal. And certainly Acuna began it by telling Jansen Pujols, a journalist in the Dominican Republic, that he would not miss Freddie Freeman at all, effectively, because they had some friction concerning Freddie's enforcement of longstanding Braves traditions or different rules or codes, if you want to call them. I think it illuminates a disconnect, Jim, that exists between more of the old guard, old-fashioned way of playing, and then the way that the modern younger players want to play. I tend to believe that you should let players play in the manner in which they choose. This game is hard enough without trying to be someone that you're not. And so I'm always a believer that we have to let players be their authentic selves on the field. It also takes another level to this, Jim, which is the only reason this is a story is that Freddie left. And I really believe when you look back at how close the Braves and Freeman's camp could have been, whose responsibility was the communication, it's hard to say. The blame certainly is shared for the fact that he's a Dodger now and not a Brave. But this sort of serves to underscore this should not be a story now because he probably never should have left in the first place, and there should have been better communication probably on both sides along the way to make that happen. Jim, he just won the World Series with the only franchise he has ever known. And while the Dodgers are a great story, he's from Southern California, I get that. Freddie Freeman today should still be an Atlanta Brave.
Jon Morosi is joining us. I could let you walk off on a strong statement like that, but I'm really curious about this, John, and I'm keeping you in wild today. But A's fans have gone through another offseason where one star after another was shipped out. We know this is how Oakland handles their business. Not only do they handle their business like this, they actually do it pretty well. But what does the message send to their fans, and how should they react?
Well, Jim, it's an important question that you're asking, and certainly you're right. They have had success with it. It is difficult, I think, for A's fans in this context that another window has closed without getting to the World Series. They've had certainly postseason berths and some very competitive teams that fell short for various reasons within the last decade. And now, I think one thing, I remember this goes back now probably 4 or 5 years, this group of players, specifically Matt Olson and Matt Chapman, I remember when they first got to the big leagues and really established themselves, the conversation was along the lines of, this might be the first generation of players that can stay because you hope you have momentum on a new ballpark by the time they're at this stage of their careers where they are right now. And obviously they're not there. The pandemic has affected this maybe a little bit, but as you know, there's lawsuits, a lot of municipal regulations and state-level regulations that go into building a new ballpark, and the A's have been quite candid in saying if there's not really a ton of progress by the end of this year, you really have to think about potentially relocation of this franchise. So I think it's that additional layer where the possibility of the Oakland A's moving to Las Vegas is now more realistic than ever before, and I think you add that, the anxiety over potentially losing your team, which of course they just had happen with the Raiders. The Warriors now playing on the other side of the bay. You think about, Jim, all the sports moments that we have witnessed collectively between football, basketball, and baseball at that site, the Coliseum and of course Oracle. It sort of hits you when you think about there not being any pro sports on that site anymore. And right now the A's, after trading a number of their key players, I would say are perilously close to going down that path unless they get some better news on the ballpark front in the next 12 months.
Kind of sad, but I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, you've got a payroll for a team that's lower than some individual players at this point right now.
Right.